Oh, Catherine Jones, you are the first one here. Bonus points for arriving early. I like to see it. Give me a hello in the chat. Let me know that you can see and hear me okay. Are you there, Catherine? You can see and hear me. Fantastic. Am I kind of small and then the presentation deck is bigger? Hey, Carolyn, welcome. We were just getting things up and running here, making sure the sound and video is working. Fantastic. Catherine and Carolyn, let me know where you are in the world and tell me about the manuscript that you're working on. What genre is it? Where are you at? Carolyn, I'm from the south of France and I write thrillers. Catherine is from Arkansas, USA. The fantasy novel I outlined in your story plan intensive from last October. Excellent, Catherine. So you're going to be familiar with what we're talking about here today because we're going to talk about a lot of things that story plan addresses. Carolyn, if you're in France, it must be almost getting to be dinner time for you. It's lunchtime here in Ottawa, Canada. Catherine, at what point in the novel manuscript are you? 6 p.m. here, says Carolyn. Yeah. 6 p.m. is dinner time in Canada. I know in France. What do you have is it called aperitif or the little meal you have after work so that you can have dinner later? I think that's a great idea. We need more meals in Canada. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. I just started a few weeks ago. My life fell apart last. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, Catherine. And it's taken me a while to get back on track. Sure, that happens to all of us. You know, life happens, and part of being a writer and a novelist is understanding that and staying nimble, right? And saying, hey, sometimes health or family or work, these things take priority for a little while. And the important part is that you return to it, right? Once things are, settled down, life comes in waves. We have those great moments where everything seems to be coming together. And then we also have those times where things can be very difficult. And I find that when I'm in those difficult times, I just remind myself it's like the ocean. It's bad for a while and then it gets better. And just don't let yourself get too down when those bad times are coming around. So we'll give it another minute or two here for folks to arrive, but I want to respect everyone's time, so I will get started fairly shortly. It's Sunday here, and my youngest daughter is just obsessed with swimming, even though it's barely swimming season here. But our new house here, Chateau de Wright, has a swimming pool, and so I promised her I'd wrap up the webinar before too long and go out and clean the pool for her, so that her and her friend can swim this afternoon. So once I'm done being a writing coach, I'm going to go be a chemist for 20 minutes, make sure my free chlorine levels are where I want them to be, and then get my kids swimming. So all of that to say, we'll try to keep this within 1 hour. This is my first time giving this presentation, though. So, normally I have these things pretty locked in timeline wise. This one we'll have to see. And Is it warm enough to swim way up north where you are? Yes, but it's cold. I mean, come summertime, give it another 2 weeks, maybe it'll absolutely be, swimming weather, summer weather. But right now, it's like we're just crawling out of spring. Spring is holding on, and so we have some days here where it is nice and warm, plus 25 Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but other days it's like almost freezing. It feels like so. But nothing deters her from swimming. It could be snowing, and if the pool's open, she's going to be out there. Hey, we've had some more folks join. Hi, Karen. Welcome to the webinar. Hello, Natasha. Natasha, 1980. That's my birthday. If you were born in 1980, Natasha, you and I must be nearly the exact same age. Karen and Natasha, let us know in the chat where in the world you are from and what manuscript you're working on, what style of book you are writing or want to write. We've got Carolyn from France and Catherine from Arkansas and me from Ottawa. So we're already a very global group here. I'll wait to hear where the new arrivals are from, and folks will continue to arrive over the next few minutes. But I do want to get started. Okay, Natasha's in San Diego working on a murder mystery horror. Natasha, I don't know if you know, but horror is my jam. That's what I write. So you and I are working on the same genre. So I got look at this connection I got here. I was born the same year as Natasha. I'm guessing writing the same genre as uh as Natasha. Yeah, we're doing good here. We're connecting. Karen, are you with us? The groovy pencil. All right. Well, let's get things started here. Thank you so much for joining me on the webinar today. This is the 4 story planning mistakes that keep novels unfinished. So I'm guessing if you're on this webinar right now, you all likely have unfinished manuscripts. Let me know in the chat if that's where things are at. And we already talked a little bit about Catherine getting stalled up via some life challenges. Let me know, other folks, what are some of the challenges you've run into when trying to get this first draft or get your manuscript completed? Hey, Lova, welcome to the call. Go ahead and let us know in the chat, Lova, where you are from and what you're working on. We've got writers from France, from America, and I'm here in Canada. So nice, wide, diverse group of folks here. Okay, well, let's dive into things while you folks let me know where you are at on the status of your manuscripts. But something I want to say right off the bat is if you've been trying to finish a novel, say for more than a year, I mean, many writers come to work with me, they've been working on it for 8 years. So if you have taken longer than you anticipated or longer than you wanted, whoa, oh yeah, hey Lova, I didn't recognize you. Hey Lova from France. So we got 2 French writers on the call right now. If you have taken longer than you anticipated, you're not lazy, you're not uninspired, you're not untalented. I think so many novelists in particular think that progress and productivity and success with their fiction writing is particularly related to the muse or to natural born talent or to some sort of discipline problem. I'm not focused enough to keep to a writing habit, a writing schedule, but I think a lot more often the problem is just that nobody has ever taught you how to actually build a novel. So if you've started strong before, but then lost momentum at chapter 8 or chapter 18, if you write every day or tried to write every day and it worked for a little while, but then things fell off and life started to happen. If you're making progress, but your story just feels off, it's like something's not right, but you can't name it. And if you've tried something like NaNoWriMo, or I know AutoCrit has their Novel 90 program on right now, if you've read craft books, if you've been in critique groups and writing groups, and you still find yourself stuck, you're not alone. And it's not about discipline. It's not about your ability to focus and get your butt in the chair. It's a writer's craft problem. More often than not, when writers come to me struggling with a manuscript, struggling to complete a manuscript, it has nothing to do with their personality, their talent, their discipline. It has to do with the fundamentals of the craft. It has to do with writer's craft. So thanks so much for joining me here today. For those of you who I have not had the chance to meet yet, my name is Kevin Johns. I'm a writing coach as well as an author. I've written 4 novels. The 4th one is coming out at the end of this month. I'm really excited about that. I've written 3 books on the craft of writing. I've done 2 picture books. I'm a father. I have 3 daughters. So when they were younger, putting together some picture books was really important to me. And then just last year, I did a coloring book for writers. It's called the Frustrated Writers Coloring Book. Bit of a fun exercise to color in some relatable photos or pictures when you're feeling frustrated with your manuscript. I'm also the host of the Writing Coach podcast. I've been doing that for a long time now. We have over 200 episodes of the show. And on that show, I speak to people who help writers succeed, whether that's other writing coaches, whether that's editors or marketing experts. And then more often than not lately, I have my own clients on the show, because when my folks go through a program like Story Plan, or they go through First Draft or Final Draft, or one of my one-on-one clients, they often find success. And so I'm really excited always to get them onto my show and talk to them about the success that they've found after I've got to see them work so hard for so long. And I've coached hundreds of writers over the last decade. I've been doing this for over a decade now. I've seen probably every challenge that a writer can run into. And I think if you're at all familiar with the writing coach space or the writing advice space, I think you might find that I'm a little different. I'm much less about the woo woo magic and the muse and all of those things. And I'm much more about the architecture of fiction. I'm just put it a different way. I say I'm not about inspiration, I'm about architecture. Here are the fundamentals that you need to build a story that works. So, most writing coaches are there to say, hey, I believe in you, believe in yourself, and everything will magically fix itself. And while I do believe in you, I think that you'll be much more likely to find success if you have a blueprint to follow. So before we start, just an honest admission. I am not saying that most writing advice out there is wrong. I'm not saying NaNoWriMo, when it was up and running, wasn't something you should have done. Uh, Show up every day, touch your book every day, work on it. That's great advice for some people. And craft books are filled with great information. I still buy craft books regularly and read them myself, despite having been in this field and teaching it and having written my own. I still love seeing other people's approach to teaching the craft of writing. But the problem is that a lot of writers are pulling advice from 10 different spots, like a chapter from a craft book you liked, a webinar that you attended, some advice about writing in a month. All of these things work together more often than not to confuse writers and trip them up, as it does help them move along, because it's not whole advice, it's incomplete advice, and incomplete advice produces incomplete results. And that's what most of you have probably been dealing with. If you're not producing fiction at the speed that you would like, that's what's going on. So, today on this webinar, I want to help you understand why drafts stall and what we can really do about it. And it's not just about getting a better, writing habit in place or finding new ways to get the muse to bless you with talent. What I want to talk about is a blueprint, is the fundamentals of how to write a book. And where I started was where most writers start, which is not knowing anything about this stuff. I had a master's degree in English literature, which meant I spent a long time in academia studying literature, but no one ever taught me how to write it. And so I followed all the advice everyone else did. I showed up, I wrote scenes, and I just kind of hoped something wonderful would come out of it. Uh, Drafts stalled, scenes went nowhere. It felt like it was one step forward, two steps back, and I couldn't figure out why. Let me know in the chat, folks. Am I stuttering at all, signal wise? I'm getting a message saying I've got a bad internet signal. Am I coming through all right, folks? Let me know. Folks in the chat, go ahead and let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm getting a message saying my internet signal is low. Oh, it's okay now. Okay, yeah. Okay, seems to be coming going a little bit here. When I moved into my new house, our internet has not been as solid as I would like, and I had a technician out last week to take a look at it, and they're supposed to have it fixed up in the next couple days. So hopefully, the internet gods will bless us, and we can continue here. If I do end up getting booted from the call, if we end up dropping, just feel free to hop back on. That's what I'll do, and we'll be able to pick up where we left off. Speaking of where we left off, I did not understand why my books were not coming together the way I wanted them to. I'd spent all this time studying books, and yet I had no clue how to actually write one. I was building a house without blueprints and then wondering why the walls kept falling down. And so then I finally had a big discovery. And like most big discoveries, it came out of a place of frustration. I really could not figure out why writing was not working for me. And so I started using the skill set that I had, analysis, story analysis, what I had learned in university, and started using it not just to analyze books, but to try to reverse engineer what worked about the books that I really loved. So this wasn't me just trying to read more books. This was me really deconstructing the books that meant a lot to me and trying to figure out why they worked, why they touched me, and what were the consistencies across the board with them. And what I found wasn't magic. This is why I come from this architectural metaphor side of things, at least. It's that I was able to see the machinery below the surface, the machinery that makes fiction work. And so things like genre conventions in iconography, macro level story structure, scene structure, character arcs, controlling idea, themes, these were the systems, the underlying fundamentals that every book that I thought was fantastic clearly had working for them. These are the things below the surface that make a book work. So this is what I call the machinery of fiction. It's genre conventions, it's story structure, it's character and character arcs, and it's theme. What is your book really about? And so every novel that has ever moved you, I would suspect, ran on all four of these pieces of machinery, and that's whether the author knew that that's what they were doing or whether you knew that that's what they were doing. This is the stuff that we pick up subconsciously, and absorb as readers. But I would argue that as an author, we want to be intentional about this stuff. We want to put it into practice in a way that we know creates something that is likely to find success at the end of it all. So my client Linda Garnett is just a recent example. She did NaNoWriMo for 12 years. For 12 years, every November she sat down and she wrote 50K words. I think that's the goal, right? And not a single one of those manuscripts ever got published. Um, they all went in the trunk. They were all drawered, or they got filed under G for garbage, right? And so Linda came to me and I showed her my story planning framework. I showed her the machinery of fiction, and she finished a book and she published a book. And she's a first time novelist, so she didn't have a built in audience or anything. And yet she hit number 7 on the Amazon category that her book was published in, called Suspense. And one of her favorite writers is the husband and wife team of Preston and Child. There was her book right up there in the top 10 on Amazon, alongside Heroes of Hers and alongside other New York Times best-selling authors. And so it was a really exciting moment. And she's now writing the second book in that Red Falls series. But this is an example of someone who went from absolute zero in terms of finished work, published work, and put in place the systems that I'm going to talk to you a bit about here today, and was able to hit top 10 charts on Amazon upon release, and is now she's done actually the first draft of the second book in the series. That's how quick she's moving at this point. Another client of mine is author Sandy Day. She just released a book called Where the Night Winds Wail. I think it's free this weekend, or it was free yesterday at least. And it had hit number 1 in all 3 of its categories in the free giveaways. And she has already broken 50 reviews on Amazon. The book's been out for like 2 weeks or something. That is great. Reviews are tough to get, folks. The best estimates are that about 1% to 2% of people who buy and read a book ultimately leave a review. So, if you want 500 reviews, you got to sell a lot of books. And Sandy's done that in a very short period of time. I interviewed her on the podcast recently, and she said, I really couldn't have done it without you and all the other members of our group. Where do you get that in this world? And I think that's a pretty special thing, right? That community and that help and that support that that Sandy recognized as kind of a special thing. And I'm proud to have put that together and to have her see the value in it. And on the podcast, when I interviewed her, we joked a little bit. She's from Ontario. I'm from Ontario. And so obviously Margaret Atwood is a big cultural icon here for us. And when Sandy's book came out, it hit top 10. And the number 1 spot on that top 10 list was Margaret Atwood. So again, just so cool that I can see someone take something from the germ of an original idea and carry it all the way through to hanging out on top 10 lists with Margaret Atwood. Pretty darn cool. So let's get to the details here of what we're going to talk about. The 4 mistakes that are almost certainly stalling your draft manuscripts. And it's those core fundamentals that we talked about already: story structure, genre conventions, character arcs, and theme. These are the 3 biggest problems that I see folks making mistakes with. And so the first mistake is not knowing your story structure. Without structure, a novel's just a series of scenes that don't necessarily build toward anything. That's why so many pantsers get halfway through a novel and then go, I don't know where this is going. I don't know what this has to say about anything. That midway point can be really challenging if you have not laid down at least a rough structure of where the book is going, of when Act One ends and when Act Two begins. I've had novelists, they're writing the final act of their book, and I ask how many scenes are left before they're done, and they say, I don't know. They have no sense of the pacing of the narrative because they're not structuring it in any conscious manner. And then when they run into problems, they call it writer's block. They say, "Oh, I'm blocked. I'm untalented. I'm too lazy for success." When really, they just don't know where to go because they have not laid down any sort of story blueprint in terms of a macro level story structure that the narrative is going to follow. So rather than sitting down and writing into the oblivion and just hoping it all comes together and has a good pacing and has the important story turns happening at the right moments, I encourage you to think about story structure. What are the major structural beats of your novel, and describe what is emotionally satisfying about the stories that actually have those things. You want to learn those big story moments. The plot point one, where we cross over from the ordinary world to the extraordinary world, the midpoint shift, the all is lost moment, the dark night of the soul, the pep talk, as I like to call it, the climax. All of these moments are so important to your story, so you want to not just be conscious that they need to be in there somewhere, but you also want to place them deliberately over the story structure so that they are effective in what they need to achieve. And as much as I say there's this underlying machinery of writer's craft, I also acknowledge that there's many, many different ways to come at this stuff. So when I say story structure, I'm not coming in saying, here's a template you have to follow, and Kevin's going to suck out all your creativity and imagination. No, I'm just saying, familiarize yourself with the Hollywood three act structure, with uh, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, with Christopher Vogler's modern conception of the hero's journey. If you're a romance author, you should be familiar with Romancing the Beat, Save the Cat, Larry Brooks's tent structure, James Scott Bell's midpoint shift. He has a great book on that topic called Start Your Book from the Middle. There's a lot of different structures out there. The Harmon cycle, Dan Harmon, the creator of Community and Rick and Morty, has a great macro level story structure that he uses on his TV shows. The point is not that there's one right structure out there that you need to follow. It's that you need structure in order to ensure that the right things are happening at the right points in your story, and that the pacing is moving at a pace that your reader is going to find enjoyable. So I'm not saying there's a template, I'm saying there's a fundamental you need to be aware of. And when you're aware of it and when you're careful with it, it solves a lot of these problems that otherwise seem like some sort of writer's block without a cause. Big mistake number two that I see, like, surprisingly often, is not knowing your genre conventions. When folks joined the chat here, I was asking you to identify what genre you're writing in. So we got a cozy mystery. Or sorry, we got a cozy mystery, mystery horror. We have a fantasy. We have a thriller. So each of you here who have come in and said, "I'm writing this genre," you need to know that genre inside and out, because genre is a contract with your readers. When you say, "I'm writing a thriller," you're making a promise to that reader to deliver on a series of conventions and probably genre iconography that, if you don't include in your story, is going to feel off to you, to your readers. You might not know why. You might not be able to say, "Oh, I'm not following the genre conventions." But when you're working on a manuscript and you have this feeling that something's not right, maybe you're not hitting the conventions you need to hit, or maybe you're not even sure what genre you're writing in. It's amazing how many authors come to me to work with me or to have a consultation call, and I ask them, "What genre do you write?" And they say, "Well, I'm not sure. It's kind of this, it's kind of that." Genre is a fundamental starting point because if you don't deliver on that promise to your readers, people are going to hate your book. And that's how you get 1 star reviews. It's not from terrible prose, it's that you set up an expectation that you did not live up to for the reader. And so many authors are so focused on their prose, on being great writers, when what you really should be focusing on, at least at the beginning and different points in the revisions process, is making sure that you're giving the reader what they expected and what they like. Know what your readers want from your style of book. Make sure you meet those conventions. Or if you do want to subvert conventions, do so consciously. So many people unconsciously break the rules of conventions and then can't understand why people don't like their book. You want to be a total expert on your genre. And then if you break the rules of your genre, you want to know why you're doing it, what effect it will have on the reader, and ultimately, if it's going to hurt things like reviews, word of mouth, these sorts of things matter. When we subvert expectations, things don't always go well. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. You might have seen my email yesterday. I finally got to see The Mandalorian and Grogu. I was so excited about that. But when you look at what Disney has done since they bought Star Wars from George Lucas, and in particular, when you look at the film The Last Jedi, the second in the Disney sequel Star Wars movies, that entire film was intended to subvert conventions, subvert expectations, and it did. And it basically tore the fan base apart and really, really hurt the franchise as a whole, to the point that they're still struggling to recover from it. And this Mandalorian movie was the first Star Wars movie in 7 years. When Disney purchased Star Wars from George Lucas for $5 billion, I think it was. They were talking about a movie a year, and then after the Last Jedi, uh, they stumbled to put out 2 more movies and then nothing after 2019. Why? Because they broke the contract with the viewers, because they said, "Hey, we're giving you a Star Wars movie." And people went in expecting a Star Wars movie like the other Star Wars movies. And instead, it was a slap in the face because all of their expectations were subverted. Next up, not knowing your character arc. I think sometimes when people hear that I'm a craft focused coach or I'm talking about things like story structure, they think that I don't care about character. But in reality, readers don't care about plot, they care about character. Speaking of Star Wars, if I ask someone to describe what Star Wars is about, they would say this kid Luke Skywalker goes on an adventure to save a princess, and he has this mentor who's kind of like a wizard, and they run into a pilot, a cocky pilot with like a shaggy dog alien companion. Everything I just said right now said virtually nothing about the plot of Star Wars. It just talked about the characters. The plot of Star Wars is actually that the rebellion steals the plans to the Death Star and then hides them in a robot that happens to end up with a farm boy on the outer reaches of the galaxy. And then the Empire is trying to hunt down those hidden plans. No one ever talks about that, even though that's the plot of the film, because we don't remember that stuff. We remember the amazing characters. And so, if your characters are not dynamic and changing, evolving, learning, making mistakes, trying, failing, and ultimately either succumbing to tragedy or achieving success by the end in a way that transforms their character from a polarity of where they started to where they ended, the story is not going to work. For the reader, character is everything. And so, when you're starting to think about your book, you really need to know, who is this character that you're writing at the beginning of the story, and how are they different at the end? That's what stories are about. Stories are about change, and change is a character who is one way at the beginning and a different way at the end. Speaking about Star Wars again, I've seen some reviews of the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, and people saying that there was no character evolution at all. That it was that Mando and Grogu were the same characters at the end of the movie as they were at the beginning. But this is not true at all. There's a clear character arc for Grogu and Mando over the course of the film. At the beginning of the movie, Mando does not trust Grogu to touch the console of his new spaceship. Midway through the film, Mando is incapacitated, and baby Grogu has to take care of him. And Grogu, taking care of Mando, attempts to fly a spaceship. Then, by the end of the film, what is our final scene? Mandalorian says, "Go ahead, Grogu, hit that button and send us into hyperspace." That's a character arc. It's not a major arc, it's not a world changing arc, but it's an arc. At the beginning of the film, Mando did not trust Grogu to touch the spaceship. By the end of the film, Mando trusts Grogu to touch the spaceship. Why? Because of what happened in the middle of the film. That's story. The gap between who your character is at the beginning and who they are at the end is the core of your novel. So, make sure you give character a lot of thought in your prep work for your novel writing. Let me know if you're still with me, folks. I'm still getting that bad internet signal. So let me know if I've lost any of you. Am I talking too much about Star Wars? That's a fault those of you who have worked with me before will be familiar with. I'm always using it as an example, even though it's not a novel. All right, Catherine is still here. Great. Oh, we're getting thumbs up. Fantastic. Oh, and we've had some other folks join as well. Hi, Susan. Hi, Lekra. Great to have all of you here. Let's continue now, moving on to our final mistake that I see authors making, and that's not knowing your book's theme. Theme is the question that your story is asking. Writing a novel is not just about plot machinations or just about character arc. It's also about asking ideas about the universe. It's about maybe sharing some wisdom with your reader that you've learned along the way. And theme is also what gives a story a unified feel. If you do not have a theme that your book is exploring, this is where you end up with these bloated manuscripts that go all over the place. I see this a lot with first time novelists because first time novelists have spent a lifetime, and some of my clients are in their 70s. So they have 70 years of experience, of ideas, of stories, and they try to cram it all into that first novel. And again, this is why these books don't get finished, or they get finished and they're 200,000 words long, because the book isn't about one thing, it's about a dozen different things. And as a result, it feels meandering, it feels bloated, and ultimately, it can feel like it's about nothing at all. Theme is not a message that you preach necessarily. You don't have to have all the answers, but you do want to have a couple of questions about life, about morality, about family, about love, whatever topic it is that you want to explore. You need to have a couple of them that the book is focused on. Otherwise, it's just going to go all over the place in terms of content. And so you want to name those themes. You want to know what you're talking about and ensure that every scene, literally every scene in your novel, engages with those themes, with those topics. I also find theme hugely helpful if you're ever not sure what a character should talk about or how you should describe an environment. These sorts of things, when you're like, I know this character needs to speak, but I just can't think of anything they should say. Go back to theme. Have them say something related to the theme of your book. If you're describing a building and you're like, it's an average house on an average street, readers have heard of these a zillion times before. They don't want to hear more description of a boring townhouse. Well, describe the boring townhouse through that lens of theme. Use words related to that theme, emphasize it. Suddenly, the book feels not just like it's about something, but that it's about one thing or a handful of themes. And again, it gives that book that clear, unified feel, as well as a bit of a distinct personality. It's a book about something. All right. So those are the four big problems that I see holding up writers time and time again. And like I said, it's not about talent, it's not about ideas, it's not about sticking to a schedule. It's about establishing the foundational elements of solid storytelling at the beginning or apply afterwards. We can talk about that in a moment as well. But let's just re-go over the four of them here again. Not knowing your macro level story structure, not knowing your genre conventions, or perhaps not even knowing your genre, happens more often than you would think, not knowing that clear arc that your character is going on, and not knowing what it is that your book either has to say about the world or the question about the world or consciousness or life that the story is exploring. Okay, so these are not talent problems, these are not discipline problems. These are writer's craft problems. And the amazing thing about writer's craft is that it's learnable. It does not matter what sort of natural talent you were born with. It doesn't matter whether you're a naturally disciplined person or not. Every published novelist that you have ever admired has learned this architecture either through years of trial and error or someone has showed it to them. And that's my job. And that's what I do inside my program, Story Plan Intensive. And Catherine here on the call has been through that program. Hundreds of authors have been through it. I've run this program on a quarterly basis for several years now. And so the June edition of this program is, I think this is the 14th time we've run this program, and it works. I've taken everything that I know that I use in the drafting of my books and put them together into a 4-week intensive program with a really simple goal, which is that by the end of the 4 weeks, you will have a complete draftable outline for your novel, and not some rough sketch, but a map through the forest that gets you from A to Z. The program is broken up into 4 weeks. The training is sent directly to your inbox via email. There's 1 to 3, sometimes 4 training videos every day over the 5 weeks. Sorry, 4 weeks. In week 1, we dig into genre. We look at the idea creation process. How do you go from an idea to a premise? In week 2, we look at those macro level story structures, and then we say, which one is right for you? What is the structure that's going to give your book the narrative momentum that it needs to have that page turner feel? In week 3, we go from the macro down to the micro and we talk about scenes. The same sort of structures that work at the macro level in storytelling almost always also work at the micro level. And so we're going to look at scenes, and scenes do not exist in isolation. They exist in relationship to the other scenes around them, in their sequence, in their act, in the story as a whole. And so we look at how to create momentum via causality, ensuring that the events of scene one lead to the events of scene two. We also dig deep into character this week. We talk about that growth arc. We take our character from A to Z, or from positive to negative, or from negative to positive. But we also talk about why they're at that starting place to begin with. What was the formative event in your character's life that set them up for the place that they begin the book at, which is usually a place of lack, a place requiring a transition or a lesson learned or a revelation about themselves or about how the world works. And then finally, in week four, we look at tone, we look at mood, we look at theme, and we have that final push to get that outline done by the end of the month. It is an intensive 4 weeks. That's why it's called Story Plan Intensive. But what you come out of the program with is a better understanding of the fundamental elements of writer's craft, of the machinery of storytelling, but also a roadmap, a blueprint, whatever you want to call it, an outline of where your story is going and what needs to happen in what order. Now, there's two different versions of Story Plan Intensive at this point. There's a self-paced individual version, and then there is the live cohorts, and that's what I'm talking about here today. Is the June 2026 cohort. In the self-paced program, you still get daily training videos, all 40 plus of them. You also get the weekly homework assignments. These are homework templates that are meant to inspire creativity and help you better understand your story. It helps you look at it through the lens of the machinery of fiction, and by the end of it, you have that outline for your book. The live version, it also includes weekly live question and answer coaching calls with me on your story. So in the independent version, you're going through this stuff on your own. With the live cohorts, you're on a call with me every week. We do 5 calls, and we're talking about your specific situation and the situation of the other writers in your cohort. And there's something really powerful about going through a program like this alongside other folks. When you see that they're struggling with the same things you're struggling with, it's helpful. Or when you see that you're actually further ahead in one section than someone else, and you never even realized that was something that you had a natural inclination for. We get a better understanding of ourselves and our talents by being around others and seeing that they have different strengths and different weaknesses. We're all different as writers. And so going through this sort of thing as a cohort gives you that community and that momentum that Sandy Day was talking about in that quote from my interview with her, where she said, where do you find that in the world today? Where do you find a group of creatives, of people who care about literature, coming together, going through something together, and then supporting each other? And a lot of the time, that support is for the long term. Like I said, I've had folks graduate from Story Plan and go into my first draft program. They come out of first draft, they go into final draft, then they launch, and together they're supporting one another and finding a lot of success. So the program is $297 for the 4-week program, and it starts tomorrow. So this is not false scarcity. This is not, I have an imaginary countdown clock, and the the cart closes for no reason other than to create urgency. This really is urgent. The program starts tomorrow. Join today, and the first email will be in your inbox tomorrow morning. You'll get started with the training, and we will have our first group coaching call together next Wednesday. And so I'll turn on the link in the chat. You'll see a little image there of the Story Plan logo, some information about what you get with the program, and then a button at the bottom there that says Secure My Spot, and that will get you into the program starting tomorrow. And if anyone does not have access to the chat for some reason, the link is here on the screen. And I am going to go to the next slide, but we will return to this link very shortly. because I want to go to this slide. I want to offer a special bonus just to the folks on the webinar today. Hopefully, my bad signal did not cut that out. I just wanted to say I want to give a special bonus to folks who joined today and who attended the webinar or watched the replay, took the time to really think about these things with me today. And that's a one-on-one coaching call sometime over the course of the program. I recommend after week 4. So you finish the program and you and I will be able to sit down with the homework, with the outline that you created, and we'll be able to go over it and make sure that it's where you want it to be, that it's ready for you to start drafting. And this is only available to folks today via the webinar. No one else will get these one-on-ones. My schedule is pretty darn jam-packed, and normally a one-on-one call with me of this kind would be $275, so just under the cost of the entire program alone. So join today, get this bonus, and you've basically made back your money right from the start here. Okay, so you have some options here. If things are not working for you with your book, well, you can do nothing. Maybe something will change. Like we were talking about right off the top, life comes in waves. Maybe things will improve. The other option is do what I did, which is figure it out for yourself. I read dozens of craft books. I did trial and error. I tried these different things, and eventually I figured out what worked. And it took a long time. It took a frustratingly long period of time, which is actually one of the reasons why I ended up becoming a writing coach. Because I was like, the answers are out there. I don't want everyone else to go wasting a decade of their life looking for them when I can give them to you. And here I'm giving some of the most important writer's craft information in a very structured, organized program that gets you a clear deliverable by the end. And so that's the third option. Go ahead and join the June edition of Story Plan Intensive. We'll have 4 weeks of training, 1 cohort. You'll finish the month with an outline, and we start tomorrow. You would get the first training tomorrow and the first coaching call on Wednesday. And as I said, I've done this program over a dozen times now. I have no trepidation at all about offering a money back guarantee because I know the program works. So give it a shot. Go in. If you watch week 1, if you watch week 2, if you don't think the program is right for you, go ahead. Just let me know. I'll refund you. In fact, go through the whole program. If you're not happy with where you end up at the end of the 4 weeks, just let me know. No hoops, no guilt. I'd rather you make the right decision about your career and your pursuit of the craft. If we're not the right fit, no worries. I'll refund your money 100%. But as I said, I've done this hundreds of times, or for hundreds of writers over a dozen times. And when people do the work, they find success every time. It's incredible to see the type of work people are able to get done in an incredibly short period of time. So some common questions I get about the program is I'm already midway through a draft. Is it too late to join the program? And I would say no, it's never too late to understand the fundamentals of the craft. In fact, not only does Story Plan Intensive work as a great system for planners to learn how to plan a novel and to set up an outline before you start drafting, it actually also works incredibly well for pantsers who have written a messy first draft. You can use Story Plan as a revision tool because, like I said from the beginning of this presentation, this stuff is non-negotiable. Your characters need an arc. They need to feel three-dimensional and wholesome and fulsome. You need to have a clear story structure that drives the pacing and momentum of your narrative. You need to have a theme or a controlling idea. Your book needs to be about something. All of these, oh, and genre, probably the most important one of all, right? You need to know what your readers are expecting and understand whether you're delivering it or not. So, regardless of whether you're about to plan a book, you're halfway through a book and you've got stuck, or you've done an entire first draft that you discovery wrote and pantsed your way through, and now want to reverse engineer the fundamentals and ensure that those elements are functioning the way they should. Another thing I hear a lot is I don't have enough time. Well, there's one call per week, so there's one coaching call. The training videos are normally 5 to 15 minutes worth of training videos each day, and then you will need to spend a few hours over the weekend to complete your homework assignments and make progress on your outline. So if you have something like 5 hours over the course of a week for the next 4 weeks, you have time to do this program. And this is the type of program that saves you time down the road rather than writing half a manuscript and getting stuck, or rather than pantsing a manuscript and then realizing you have to cut half of it because it's way too long or something's not working. Invest the 5 hours a week for the next 4 weeks. It's an intensive program. Do some intense work, but come out of it with the foundation in place to speed up the rest of the process, to get the first draft written faster, to make the revisions process so much easier because you've already ensured the fundamentals are there. And then finally, I'm a pantser. Outlining isn't for me. A lot of pantsers come into story plan and are transformed into planners through the process because they discover it's not creatively stifling, it's not confining to the story you want to tell. It's in fact something that aids you in the process. Author Anne Kane was already a successful romance author when she came to story plan. The thing was, she wanted to write more, she wanted to write faster, and she suspected that perhaps planning would help her do so. Well, she joined story plan, she graduated, and in the last year alone, I think she's published half a dozen different books. They're all selling incredibly well. In fact, they're selling so well that her publisher is going in her back catalog, pulling out some of her older books, giving them new covers and republishing them, because the books that she's planned and written after story plan intensive are just being gobbled up by readers. They're selling incredibly great. And so that's the story of someone who pantsed and was a successful pantser, and yet took it to a whole other level after doing the story plan intensive program. Okay, so here's that link again in case you do not have access to the enrollment button over in the chat. Live cohort, the group coaching program does start tomorrow. I would love for you to join me on this story planning journey. I think we're going to have a ton of fun. We do every time. Community is forged, stories are written, craft is learned, and progress is made. So I can't wait for those of you who this is right for at this time to join us and participate in the program starting tomorrow. So that brings us to the end of the presentation, but I absolutely wanted to make sure we had time for questions and answers. So go ahead in the group. Let me know if you have any questions about the material that we covered on the presentation today, these mistakes that I see tripping up authors, and let me know if you have any questions about the program. And there's Catherine saying this was a great refresher of last October. That's awesome, Catherine. I refresh every time I teach this stuff, right? Again, that's the great thing about fundamentals is they don't change, and every time you revisit them, you understand them in a new light, you understand them better, or you've grown as an artist, you've changed, you're working on a new project now, and the way the fundamentals worked for the last project now work different for the new project, right? Something like story structure. Maybe Larry Brooks's tent structure, 4-act structure worked really good for your last project, but maybe for this new project, the Elizabethan 5 act structure. That's something Sean Coyne from Story Grid also talks about. He talks about this middle build with 3 big acts in the middle. That's a 5 act structure. Maybe that works better for the second book. And so, revisiting this stuff, thinking about it, going over it again throughout your career is great, because it's always good to return to fundamentals, to return to the foundational elements of your craft. Any other questions? Comments? All right. Well, it is now 7 p.m. for the French folks on the call. So I will, 7 p.m., I guess, is still an early dinner for you, right? You're probably not ready for dinner quite yet. But I will let you go get some food. Everyone else, I hope you found this session enlightening in some way. I hope it helped you rethink your own progress and rethink maybe some of the mistakes you've made, or recontextualize something that you might have thought of as a lack of talent or a lack of discipline, and just realize that the fundamentals of the craft are something we all need to learn. And when we implement them, we have so much greater a chance for success. All right, folks, thank you so much. I hope you will join me this June for Story Plan Intensive. And if not, I will see you in your email inbox. Whenever you see that, ahoy hoy, I'm headed your way. So, all right, have a great day, everyone. Talk to you soon.